it has been constant worship and faith building. From the volunteers who have come in to write scriptures on the 2x4s all over the house, to strangers who were covered in mud, joining in circles in the front yard in prayer, crying, to the lady that I spent the day painting a house with one day, who we just cried and shared our testimonies and our personal faith journeys. I have had more worship experiences in the muck and the debris of that storm than I've ever experienced in a sanctuary of a church building.
That's the voice of Courtney Dailey, a novelist who has lived a pretty novel life for the last 6 months or so. Dailey has been deeply involved in flood relief projects in hurricane-damaged eastern Tennessee, where she lives. She has become known for her God stories that have emerged from the sacrifice and service of the many flood relief volunteers and the families they help. One of Dailey's Facebook videos of God stories has received 5 million views. She's here today on the Practical Faith Academy podcast to inspire us with the details about the wonderful things happening in East Tennessee and the faith lessons that arise from such an effort. I'm Cecil Taylor of Cecil Taylor Ministries, teaching Christians how to live a 7-day practical faith. Everything I do, whether blogs, books, or videos, is about taking our faith from Sunday into the rest of the week, applying scripture and faith to life situations. In the Practical Faith Academy podcast, I add other voices with other life experiences to understand how they put faith into practice. I hope you enjoy and benefit from these podcast interviews, and I appreciate you sharing this podcast with others. I met Courtney Dailey last year at a Christian Writers Conference, but her writing career is not what brings her to the Practical Faith Academy podcast. 4 months after we met, Hurricane Helene rampaged through the eastern part of the U.S., inflicting incredible damage in several states, including her region in eastern Tennessee. Courtney, her husband, and others have dedicated tremendous hours since September in helping their neighbors rebuild, and she's here to share what she's learned out of that experience. Courtney, welcome to the Practical Faith Academy podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Cecil. I am so excited to be here. I love any opportunity to share what God's been doing.
Oh, amen. Well, we're looking forward to hearing it. You know, you've had a unique perspective on practical faith in your own efforts and in observing others' efforts in the hurricane cleanup there. And when I say 7-day practical faith, what does that mean to you?
This whole entire journey has changed our faith walk tremendously. My husband and I like to say the Hurricane Helene relief work has quadrupled our faith, because the things that we have seen literally every single day, the things I saw just this morning, but every single day for the last 4 months, it is 7-day practical faith. It's, and I want to give just a little bit of backstory because I have to set the foundation for where this came from. We did not intend to get into hurricane relief work. My husband is a contractor. He builds homes and we flip homes. And after the hurricane hit, a lot of people didn't realize, of course, it dumped the 29 inches of rain in the mountains of Western North Carolina. But a lot of people don't know that walls of water swept into the valleys of East Tennessee, into this little forgotten area of Hampton, Valley Forge, Irwin, Jonesboro, those areas. And we actually had a friend who, he was 69 at the time. He has since turned 70, and his name is Jerry. And we knew he had made a post on Facebook saying, there's water coming into my yard. And that was the last we had heard from him. And cell service was out. Nobody could contact anyone else. And we went looking for him. We were out of town. We came back into town. It was 2 days after the flood when we found him. And my husband was working with the volunteer fire department in Hampton. I was apart from him when I found Jerry in his front yard just crying. And the whole back of his house was completely blown out, like a dollhouse that you open the back of. And all of the contents had washed out the back of his house. I mean, his refrigerator was laying in the middle of the kitchen floor. His washing machine was gone. The dryer was in the living room. All of his clothing, his furniture, his deep freezer was completely missing. Couldn't find it anywhere. And he said, I don't have flood insurance and I don't know what I'm going to do. And when I saw the back of his house, I thought, oh, we can't rebuild this. Like, it's a tear down. I don't even know how can, and we thought, okay, well, surely someone will come on, like government insurance. There's got to be something. And I went home that night. I didn't get home till like 8:30 because I took Jerry and we got him a toothbrush. I mean, he didn't even have anything but the clothes on his back. He had nothing. So we took him to get him some supplies. I took him to eat. And that night I came in and I get emotional talking about it. I could hardly talk when I told my husband what had happened. I was just sobbing. And I said, honey, we got to rebuild Jerry's house. We have to rebuild his house. I said, is there some way we can do it? And he was like, well, he said, honey, it's probably going to be, I mean, at least you're looking at least $100,000. This is, and I said, we've got to, I don't know, how else can we do it? I said, what are we going to do? So that night, my husband and I always pray before bed. And we prayed fervently, crying, God, please help us. Help us find a way to rebuild Jerry's house, any way that you can help us. Resources, whatever we can do. So the very next morning, I dragged my poor kids out of bed at like 7:30 a.m. and took them down to Spring Street. And we started working, mucking out Jerry's house. And that day was the first foundational pillar for the faith that we have grown over the last 4 months. Every time we looked up, the person was there who we needed. There was a contractor who came by with his nail gun who secured the house and said, you can save it. These are the steps you need to take. There were volunteers who came in and ripped out drywall. There was a guy who came with a pressure washer and pressure washed the house. We needed tools, and we would walk outside and a crowbar would show up in the yard, or a ladder would show up in the mud, or all of the volunteers would be hot and thirsty and somebody would pull up on a side-by-side with a case of water. It happened all day long. And the workers, the volunteers who were all working together, were all in there. And I'm talking, it was everybody, Cecil. I mean, it was, you had your Baptists, you had your Methodists, you had your Catholics, you had your Christian church. It didn't matter. Everybody was in there, strangers helping another stranger and talking about God the whole time, sharing their testimonies. I mean, it was a worship experience. And that night when I came home, I told the kids to go in the house, and I sat in the garage and I said, I've got to make a video. I had 600 followers on Facebook, like just a peon account, just trying to build my platform, whatever. And I thought, maybe if I make this video, we can have some more volunteers and we can have people donate some materials. But I really wanted to tell everybody about what God had done that day. So I was covered in like mud and like sheetrock crumbles in my hair, like makeup running down my face. I smelled, I'm so glad you couldn't smell the video. I smelled so bad. So I made this video that was like 4 minutes long, and I was sobbing. I could hardly talk, talking about what God had done that day and saying, we need help. Well, the next day we got up early, went to work again. We didn't have cell service. We didn't have any internet except at night. So when we came home Tuesday night, and I connected to the Wi-Fi, I was like, Paul, that video got like 6,000 views. And he was like, wow, honey, that's like the most you've ever had. And I was like, I know, this is great. Like, maybe people will come and help us. Well, the next morning I got up and it was at 70,000 views. And I had hundreds of messages in my inbox. By lunchtime, it was at 200,000 views. And I think now, the last time I checked it, it was about to hit 5 million views. And people from all over the world, I get so choked up about it, started messaging and saying, hey, I'm from California. I can send flooring. We're in Georgia. We can do the insulation and sheetrock. I'm in Virginia. I'll do the kitchen cabinets. I'm in Georgia. I'll pledge to buy his appliances. Every single thing we needed within a matter of a week was pledged. And we set up this donate account through our church because we didn't want to, like do a GoFundMe or a personal, like we wanted God to get the glory, but we wanted it to be legitimate. So people knew, like, this isn't a fake thing. Like, we're really helping. Right. And the stuff that poured in, we were able to just jump in and get started on his house. Since that day, it has been constant worship and faith building, from the volunteers who have come in to write scriptures on the 2x4s all over the house, to strangers who were covered in mud, joining in circles in the front yard in prayer, crying, to the lady that I spent the day painting a house with one day, who we just cried and shared our testimonies and our personal faith journeys. I have had more worship experiences in the muck and the debris of that storm than I've ever experienced in a sanctuary of a church building.
I can believe that. Well, this is Courtney Dailey with me on the Practical Faith Academy podcast. And Courtney, I remember that video. I shared it myself with some other people. And one thing I remember, just to add on, was there was a time you needed like a backhoe or something. And you walked outside and a guy is driving down the street with a backhoe. And it's like, okay, God, I guess we got the backhoe, right? It's amazing.
We said it. We literally said if we just had a backhoe, and we barely got the words out of our mouth, and he pulled into the driveway.
Yeah. What an amazing day. And just the fact that I think what I also remember about that is that there were times during the day you were just going to stop. You were just going to give up for now or whatever. And like, oh, we're stuck. We can't do any more.
We don't have any more help.
And then, help would arrive, and whether it was people or resources or a ladder, or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's just amazing. I think one thing I like about this story also is that how much people have been willing to sacrifice as part of it, whether it's their time, whether it's their goods or their money. What strikes you about sacrifices being part of this faith experience?
That's been the biggest thing that it's really, well, I don't know if it's the biggest thing. There have been so many big things, but just the willingness of strangers from all over the world to do whatever. Like this week, we needed a weed eater for a guy who has a lawn care business and all of his stuff washed away. But the weed eaters that he uses are really nice still weed eaters, gas powered. And they're like, I mean, with all of the trimmings and stuff, they're like $400. And I had so many people in my inbox wanting to buy this guy's 2 replacement weed eaters. It was unbelievable. And they didn't just message me. They had already done the research and messaged me and said, hey, I found the weed eater you need. I researched it. It's 30 minutes from you. Is there any way it's paid for? Can you go pick it up and take it to this guy? We were sitting in Jerry's front yard one day, and he had set up this little tent. And we were out there. It became a hub where people came together to pray, to eat. We had all these supplies, first aid. It just became the hub. And we were sitting out there one day, and this guy pulled in. I'm not going to say where he was from because he wouldn't want that. He wanted to remain anonymous. But he was from over 5 hours away. He had driven. And he got out of his truck, and he said, are you Courtney? I said, yeah. And he said, so this must be Jerry. And I said, yeah, this is Jerry. And he said, okay. He said, well, I've been watching your videos. I wanted to come down here and see if it was legitimate what you guys are doing. And I was like, yeah, thanks for coming. This is great. Well, he reaches into his pocket. He talked to us for a few minutes. He saw the house. He saw everything that was going on. And he gives Jerry an envelope with $5,000 in cash. He hands me an envelope, which I don't usually handle cash. I don't like it. Everything goes through the church secretary. It just makes me uncomfortable. With $1,250 in cash, and says, this is from some of our other church members. We want it to go to people up and down the street. Find some other people to give this to today. Then he pulls out his checkbook and writes a check to our church for $10,000 and said, we want this to go toward rebuilding these homes. We had another guy who pulled in one day who'd been watching the videos, and he was like 30 or 45 minutes away. And he said, I have stage 4 cancer. I have prostate cancer. I'm not going to live much longer. And I wanted to come down here and see what's going on. And he said, I want to pledge to you that whatever house you take on, you'll have a $5,000 check from me to the church to help pay for that house. And every house that we've taken on, he's come and written a check for $5,000. Just the generosity of all the strangers from all these different places and all these different faiths has been incredible to witness.
I'm almost speechless to hear these kind of stories. And, one of the things you touch on is how we pull together. We talk about the great cultural divide we have right now.
Mm-hmm.
We're all distressed by it, and we really don't know what to do about it because we focus so much on the differences. But when you get in a situation like this, you realize how much we really believe together.
Yes. That's been a beautiful thing because I watched people personally who I knew had argued over doctrinal issues, who wouldn't step foot in each other's church buildings because they did not fellowship with each other,
Right.
come together in these houses and insulate a house together and pray together and talk about God together and share a meal. And I mean, that's what it's all about, right? Because when we take the time to serve and take the focus off of ourselves, there isn't any room for this arguing and all the petty little divisions that we've created.
I love that, saying that it's when we take the focus off of ourselves. I find, I'm getting off on a little bit of tangent here, but I find for myself, when I start talking about the principle of the thing, it's not the principle of the thing. It's my own will, it's my
Yeah.
own selfishness, and I try to hide behind something else and point to that, but it's really my stubbornness that
Yeah.
is hampering
Same.
me, and I believe that's really the root of a lot of things. I love what you said about getting beyond ourselves, getting beyond our own selfishness, getting away from the things that we hide behind, and
Yeah.
just getting out and being real. It's amazing. Courtney Dailey is with me here on the Practical Faith Academy podcast. And I'd like to understand, I don't think I really fully get the scope. How I know about Jerry, and I know you've kind of gotten him pretty settled now, if
Yeah.
I understand pretty well. How many people have been helped by your churches and just this collective's relief? How many people have been and are being helped?
That was the coolest thing, because when we started working on Jerry's house, it very quickly became an issue because so much was being done on his house. And you look down the street at these other homes and progress wasn't being made. And so we decided, you know what? We've got so many resources coming in. I mean, God can do it. God is bigger. God can do this. So we went door to door to all the homes and got the list of who are the homeowners, what's the address, what's their contact number, and what do they need, from a new heat pump to a car and a truck to someone to help them make their house payment this month, to whatever, all of their needs. And then we actually got the idea from a volunteer from Florida who was up here working. She had said something about how that their group was helping someone across the river in a different area, and they had decided to stay with them till they were turnkey. And I was like, man, that's such a cool idea. So we knew we couldn't do it all. We were already so overwhelmed with Jerry's, and our church, took on another home down the street too. So we came up with this thing that a church could adopt a family. So we made a video and we were like, okay, so if one church is in charge of one family, they come in and commit, we will stay with this family all the way through the process. The beautiful thing about this is that it's not just helping them find contractors and lumber and all the things that they need, but it's also offering them prayer and spiritual support, buying Christmas gifts for their kids, restocking their kitchen, giving them a pounding to fill their pantries before they move back in, every single thing they need till the finish line. So on Spring Street, we had 10 or 11 homes that were adopted by different churches. And then other churches outside the area, if they wanted to partner with these churches, they could partner. Like, we were partnering with this other church in Knoxville, Tennessee. This guy was so awesome. I met him in the front yard of one of the houses we were working one day. And he would just, every time he called me, he's, Courtney, what do you need? What do you need? Like, we need a refrigerator. I'll be there on Wednesday with a refrigerator. He would drive up from La Follette with a refrigerator, just whatever we needed, just to provide support. So there were 10 or 11 homes on Spring Street, plus some apartments that were helped. Right now, there are 3 new builds going up from homes that were just completely washed away, new construction. And those are being built by a small church in Louisa, Kentucky, Meads Branch Free Will Baptist Church. They only have 150 members. And they came down. I gotta tell this one God story. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm so long-winded, but it's just, the stories are crazy.
Go for it.
There was one morning that we got down there. Everybody was running these heaters in their homes, trying to get the subfloor dried out. We had mucked out and pressure washed and all that. So we were trying to get the floors dried out. And one of the homeowners, Jeff, had come to me that morning and said, do you know anybody who has kerosene? Because kerosene was so expensive. And I was like, I don't know. we'll pray about it. I'll get back to you. So I was down the street at Jerry's, and I look up, and there's this brigade of trucks and side-by-sides pulling into the street with like 50 cans of kerosene. And I was like, what? So they all start getting out. There's this huge team of them. They were the guys from Meads Branch Free Will Baptist Church. And I was like, what are y'all doing? And they said, a couple weeks ago when all this happened, we started praying and we started asking God, what should we do? What should we do? And we got together and we took up a collection at the church, and we decided we're going to buy kerosene and kerosene heaters. We're going to drive down and we're going to find an area where they need us. And of course, God sent them on the day that we needed them. So while they were there and we were all praying together and talking about everything, they went back home to their church of 150, and they started praying about it. And they knew we needed 2 homes at the time that needed to be rebuilt from the ground up. And he called me, it was like 3 or 4 days later, and said, Courtney, we're committing. We want to build those 2 homes from the ground up. And he was like, we don't have the money to do it. We have God. That's all we need. And it was so awesome because I got phone. Of course, I was crying my eyes out. I have cried every single day for 4 months. But the cool thing was I got to call the 2 families and tell them there's a church and they're going to build you a house. I mean, you wouldn't believe those conversations. I mean, that's just something like one of the coolest moments in my life. The one girl was at work. She stepped outside. She was sobbing. She said, you mean like what are we going to have to do? What are we going to have to pay? I was like, no, like this is all. She said, why? I said, because they love God and they want to serve people and they want to serve you and they want to help you in your time of need, because that's what God calls us to do. And she said, thank you. I said, listen, don't thank me. This is God. Don't thank us. This is God. This is all his thing. So sorry, I got way off track there. So we've had 10 or 11 homes on Spring Street. Now the Kentucky guys are doing a 3rd home. They've raised all the money they've needed. They've gotten every supply that they needed. It all came pouring in from all over the world, just like with us, like God always does. And now we have moved on to River Road in the Valley Forge area. There was a couple down there that had been working pretty much on their own since day one on 9 different homes in that area. So now our church has moved down there and we're helping. We're currently working on 4 homes. There have probably been 3 or 4, maybe 5 who've already moved back into their homes. We're doing a complete rebuild this spring. So I don't even know. It's just, it keeps going. And the thing is, we keep saying we don't know how long it's going to go because it's God's plan. Right. So when God stops, we'll stop, because we didn't plan on any of this. It was all him.
Well, I love that when you need kerosene, God gives you kerosene, right? That's you and I were talking beforehand. I was in charge of a project that I kind of stumbled upon, and it was the biggest one I've been a part of, but it's not as big as what y'all have been doing. But what I found all the way through it was that when you step out in faith, God will multiply your efforts. God will keep adding the resources you need. And Courtney, I've seen it all through my life, time after time after time, but especially when I was in a situation where the need was bigger, God responded bigger. And I believe it for y'all.
Yeah, it happens every day. Yeah. Literally every day. And we call them God stories. And I've been we share the progress of the work because a lot of these people have donated, but it's really not the progress. What people are hungry for are the God stories.
Oh yeah. When I get on
thirsty
and see,
for that.
Yeah. When I see it's like, hey, it's Courtney here. And I got a couple of more God stories today, and I love hearing them. I don't get every one of them come across my feed, but it's the kind of thing that you start to become, I can tell you start to become very aware of God's presence, and you're looking for it. And even though it surprises you, you're also not surprised at the same time, I'll bet, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It just happened this morning. We were supposed to have 2 or 2.5 inches of rain over the next few days. And we have 23 volunteers coming in. And this morning I was like hectic and I was rushing around trying to get my daughter to school because I had to be down on River Road at 7:45 to meet these 23 guys and make sure everybody was on task and they had everything they needed and blah, blah, blah. And we've been praying for the last couple of days, like, God, just hold up the rain, stop the rain, hold up. And all these weather forecasters, all these guys are saying, oh, this is going to be the most rainfall amount that we've seen since Hurricane Helene, and get ready. And I was like, why this week? They have to put up siding and roofing and all this. So we've just been praying. So I got down there this morning and it wasn't raining, which is supposed to be just pouring. It was not raining. And I got out and all of the guys had already figured out everything they were supposed to do and they needed to do. And I'm like, okay, can anybody do siding? And this guy's like, that's what I do. I'm the siding guy. And this other guy's like, yeah, I'm going to help him. And then this other guy says, I can do the roofing. That's what I'm here for. And then somebody else is like, we can hang the sheetrock. And another guy says, I'm a drywall finisher. And another guy's an electrician. And then one guy says, I'm a finisher. I finish floors and I put in flooring and do trim, do all the finishing work. Is there any work like that? And I'm like, yeah, as a matter of fact, 4 houses down, this other guy, Sam, needs his flooring put in today. Can you do that? So he takes a few of his guys. And I was just standing there and I took the other guys down to Sam's house so they could get started. And I walked back out to my car and I was like, why am I even here? Like, God has it all under control. And I reached for the door handle on my car. And the sun came out.
Oh.
And I just stopped in the middle of the street and took a video of this sun shining down River Road. That was like, well, there's my reminder for the day, right, God? Like, you're in control. This is all you. You've got it figured out. When we think that we can help God, like, what a joke. Like, he has the master plan. Like, we're just so blessed to get to witness what he's doing.
So, Courtney, what I see in your story also is being equipped, not just all the things around you, but personally equipped, right? And when I was in the position with my project, I am the least handy guy there is. I mean, I was making mistakes. They'd say, we need an air conditioner from Home Depot. I'd run down and buy the wrong thing, and then we'd have to figure out what to do about that. I had to bring people around me, and yet I was in charge. And so I kept asking God over and over, like, I'm trying to write a book right now, and why am I doing this? And finally, God says in prayer, because you'll listen, because you'll follow, and because you'll lead. And that's what's needed.
Yeah.
You can have all the skills, but you also need people to bring their skills of leadership or to listen, to be a listener to other people and to understand what they really need. One of the things we had on our project was listening to the people to make sure we were giving them what they needed, not what I thought they needed, right? And so,
Right.
so I see in your story, I'm just curious, how do you feel like you've been equipped that you weren't really up to the task, but God has used what you knew and expanded you as you've gone along?
It's so funny that you say that because we have this favorite quote in our little group that's all been working. It's, God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called.
Ah,
Because, I mean, really, God put this team of people together. And there's a businessman who's been vetting and channeling campers where they needed to go. And there's another guy who's been getting cars. And there are a couple of preachers in the group who just minister to people and pray with them and help them. And I mean, it's all the different parts of God's body. We see it here. I mean, we see it today. We've got a guy coming in from Georgia today who's cooking barbecue for all of the crews and bringing his food trailer. God takes every single person, and it doesn't matter what their gift is. It doesn't matter what. And I was actually thinking about that this morning because I've been listening to the chronological Bible through a year, listening to it on the YouVersion app. And this morning I was listening to them talk about the temple when God had them setting up the temple. And he goes through all of his specifics about exactly how he wants it done. But then he specifically calls on this one guy who is really artistic, that he wants him to come in and do all these artistic finishes on it. And I thought, that is so cool. That is that guy's talent that he can use for God. And I mean, we've had people who are designing t-shirts and selling them and sending all the proceeds for flood relief. We've had people who are just taking the videos and taking them to churches and into areas and trying to fundraise for us. We have every single person has their thing. And every day we get up and we're like, God, just show us what to do. Because honestly, I still don't feel equipped at all. I feel like every day, the more I do, the more I mess it up. And now that we're kind of in phase 2 on River Road, I've learned to stop planning and to stop stressing, because it's just like this week, all the materials were delayed until February 10th. And we were supposed to have these major rainstorms come in February 10th. And now we have 23 volunteers all coming February 10th. And then the guy reached out wanting to come in and make food for the crews this week. That's hands off the wheel. That's all God. God's the one orchestrating all of that. And the more we try to do, he has to come behind us and clean up our messes.
Well, Courtney, I want to take this wonderful episode and help our listeners map it into their lives. And I hope they're inspired by this, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But as far as helping you, but uh, what I'm trying to think about is the lessons to take to the rest of your life out of this. I know God has been moving powerfully in the community, outside the community, in your family. And I think you said something interesting about why am I worried? Why am I stressing? And so as far as our personal, practical faith walks, what is something that maybe a couple of 3 things that you can think of that you want to apply and would like others to apply to their faith journeys based on these lessons?
I think number one, the biggest thing for me has been when you're praying for something, God is going to answer your prayers, not in the way that you have it figured out. I think a lot of times when we pray, and this has changed my prayer life so much, seeing the prayers come to life right in front of me almost instantaneously sometimes. And I have been praying for the last couple of years. I don't know how many people out there pray this same thing. I've been praying to become a published author because I am not published yet. And throughout this journey, even in the last 4 months, I am up to 156 rejections since I started. I have an agent, I won all these awards, blah, blah, blah. I'm not published. But every day for the last 2 years, I've been praying so hard, God, let me be a light for you and let me shine that light on other people to change lives. Let me get published. Let me be a light for you. Let me get published. Let me have massive impact. Let me get published. And God came in behind me. And now I don't even know how many Bible studies going in my inbox and my Facebook right now with people who are struggling with all kinds of issues, whether they are grieving or I had one person I was talking to for a couple of weeks before they came out and told me, I'm not a woman, I'm actually a man. I struggle with gender issues and I need help from God. And that night I fell apart because it dawned on me. I told my husband, I said, if I had written a Christian fiction book and it was on the shelves in Barnes and Noble, that person I've been studying the Bible with for weeks would never have walked into Barnes and Noble and picked up my book and gained anything from it. But because I was praying to be a light and have impact, God has shown me, Courtney, it's not about you and your little publishing dreams. Like, you're going to glorify me in a way that's bigger, that can reach more people, and you don't see the plan. That's the biggest thing. I think we don't see the plan. And I'm trying every day because, good grief, I'm never going to make it there. I'm trying to trust and just realize, trust his plan, because he sees it all. And we see through a tiny peephole, but he sees it and he's got it. He's got our backs when we lose faith.
Courtney, I feel, I sense that there's a book that's going to come out of this experience. And maybe that's when you become a published author. Now, whether it's a nonfiction book, a collection of what really happened, or whether it's a novel inspired by that to kind of isolate some of the details or to composite some people together or whatever, I believe that this will be in a book someday.
I
So,
hope so, because I started it in November.
oh, you did?
I did. I did. I
I'm
did.
all
I talked
behind
to
it.
my agent, and she's helping me
Okay.
lay it out.
If you need somebody to endorse the book who's a published author, I can help you with that.
Yes, thank you, Cecil.
Not that it's going to add a lot of cachet to it, but at
That's
least you
awesome.
got one.
Yes.
So, what would you say in just people's daily faith? Your best tip, and maybe you already gave it, but maybe just things that you think are good for people to do on a daily basis to maintain that 7 day practical faith and to live their lives daily in the Lord's light.
I think prayer is the biggest thing.
Okay. Yeah.
The prayers that we've watched God move on. I think that sometimes we get this idea in our head that God is up there in the sky and he is busy and he is big and we can't bring the little things to him. I bring things to God now that I never would have brought to him before. And I mean, praying for it to stop raining and just praying and praying and praying. Please let it stop raining. Please let it not rain. Please let us make progress. We pray about everything. And I think that is one of the things that has really strengthened my faith through all of this is that I set aside special time every morning. That's my quiet time before everyone is awake, that I can sit and talk to God about all of these things. But we try to just be in prayer all day long too, as needs arise. We're constantly praying. And the prayer life, just when you are walking with God and you're telling him every little thing, some of those prayers have not been pretty. Some of those prayers have been frustration and crying because it wasn't all beautiful. We've had some struggles and some issues along the way, but I feel like I've grown closer to God because I see him as my best friend through all this and my partner.
Amen. And you do not receive because you do not ask. But in this case, you've asked and you've received. Let's wrap up for the people listening. If there's anything they can do and want to join in this effort, or to maybe there's other efforts going on that you know about, what's your advice for them to get involved?
If you go to my author Courtney Dailey page on Facebook, I have all the videos from everything from the beginning. And I do share links, but I really don't. That's been our biggest thing since we started is we weren't going to fundraise. Now, if you go to Central Community Christian Church, Johnson City, Tennessee, and go to our website, we have a place to donate online with the drop down box that's for the flood relief fund. But really we haven't been fundraising because God has given us every single thing we needed. One thing we do need right now that I just learned about this morning, we need sheds. The
Sheds.
majority of these people, it's in an area, most of the homes are not very big. Most are 800 or 900 square feet. We've got the guy who was a landscape guy that his shed has caved in. It's full of mud. A lot of people's sheds washed away. And in the beginning, we had this group that was providing sheds for free for everybody on Spring Street. Well, now, you know how it goes. Like it's a few months in and the stuff is starting to run out and stuff. We need sheds for almost everybody down on River Road. That would be an awesome way to help. If people want to come and volunteer, they can message me. I am about 9 days behind on messages right now. I try to stay on top of it, but I probably have 1,000 messages right now. I try to do a couple hours a day of just replying to people, but I will reply to every single message. And if people want to bring a crew and come down and work or serve food or sow grass in people's yards this spring who are just muddy and need help, I believe that if you want to come and you feel in your heart that God wants you to come and do that, he's going to find the perfect place for you.
Well, I'm glad you answered my message and came on the podcast. So thanks so much, Courtney.
Me
It's
too.
been just such a blessing to have you here. God bless all your efforts, and glory to God for what's going on there. Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Cecil.
I hope those of you listening have had your hearts touched as mine was. And in that spirit, I have a sad addendum to this episode. Courtney and I recorded this podcast a few days prior to the posting of it. And since the recording, flooding has devastated parts of Kentucky, including Louisa, Kentucky, the home of the Meads Branch Free Will Baptist Church. That's the group that gave kerosene heaters and fuel and then adopted homes in Tennessee. Please see the podcast. Okay, I'm going to pick up at please see the podcast description. This is part B. Take 1, 3, 2, 1. Please see the podcast description for a link to help this church that gave so much to others. Also find links to help out in Eastern Tennessee and to learn more about Courtney. Also, please learn more about my ministry as you scroll down the page regarding my free content and my books and video studies. If you hadn't heard, I'm still rejoicing in the good news that my book, Unison Parenting, the comprehensive guide to navigating Christian parenthood with one voice, has been honored with the 2025 Independent Press Award for Parenting and Family. Unison Parenting is available through Amazon and other online booksellers, through CecilTaylorMinistries.com, and through my new website, UnisonParenting.com. Next time, I'll be joined by Constance Hastings, who has written an insightful book on how Jesus pursues us to become his follower. She'll also get into the tension between doubt and fear. Her book sounds like a cousin to my book, From Comfort Zone to Trust Zone, so I'll be interested to hear her take on how Jesus challenges us. Until next time, remember, God sends you into the world every day. Please see the podcast description for a link to help this church that gave so much to others. Also find links to help out in Eastern Tennessee and to learn more about Courtney. Also, please learn more about my ministry as you scroll down the page regarding my free content and my books and video studies. If you hadn't heard, I'm still rejoicing in the good news that my book, Unison Parenting, the comprehensive guide to navigating Christian parenthood with one voice, has been honored with the 2025 Independent Press Award for Parenting and Family. Unison Parenting is available through Amazon and other online booksellers, through CecilTaylorMinistries.com, and through my new website, UnisonParenting.com. Next time, I'll be joined by Constance Hastings, who has written an insightful book on how Jesus pursues us to become his follower. She'll also get into the tension between doubt and fear. Her book sounds like a cousin to my book, From Comfort Zone to Trust Zone, so I'll be interested to hear her take on how Jesus challenges us. Until next time, remember, God sends you into the world every day.